with Tomas, Michaud, and the famous world-renowned Ami Fields.
Hello.
Today we're going to talk about the CAGED system. And I don't want to pretend to be an expert. This is just something that I've studied off and on with, lightly over the years. And, found some use out of it and, didn't get too passionate about it. But I got a question this week about the CAGED system, which was related to the CAGED system. And I figured I better do a little introduction before I go answering this question. Everybody else is thinking, what the heck is he talking about? So, welcome. We're going. Let me give you a little rundown on how this is going to go. First, I'm going to give you a little presentation on the CAGED system. Ami's going to dance. No, we cut that part out. Sorry, my mistake. Then we're going to go. Both of us are going to answer all your questions, and please feel free to add your questions to that live chat thing. And we will get to the questions after the presentation, unless it's directly related to what we're talking about. So Ami's going to keep an eye on that. Mm-hmm. Then we're going to do a drawing. Each month we do a drawing for students of my Real Guitar Success membership site. And what they do is they complete a series of 20 practice sessions, and those that complete get entered into the drawing for a $50 Amazon gift card. Just something to make it a little more fun and give you a little inspiration to get through the whole thing. So let's start off with the CAGED system. Do you know what the CAGED system stands for?
No, but I just figured it out that it's not like caged like what you put a hamster in.
No. What do you call when somebody uses letters to abbreviate a word?
Like acronyms? No.
Yeah. I'm not sure, but CAGED, the letters stand for, each letter stands for a chord, C-A-G-E-D.
Okay.
So it's built around the idea that there are 5 chord forms that can kind of account for all the chords you can make on the neck. C, A chord, G, E, and the D chord. So the idea is that these chords can be both chords, 5 chords, but they can also be considered chord forms, and that's where the CAGED system comes in. Felix over here is shaking his head, chord forms. Now the difference is, a chord is actually the sound that you hear. Even if you don't look at my hand, you could say that's a C-sounding chord. Well, some people can.
Right.
The idea is it has a C chord sound. It has the notes that make up a C chord. And in any instrument, if you play those notes, you got a C chord.
Right.
The form is what it looks like on the guitar, and you can move it around. You see, I can take that C chord and move it up the neck, and it's still a C form, but it's not a C chord anymore. Once I change the notes, it's not a C chord.
So like movable chords.
Movable chords.
Movable chord shapes.
Those who play bar chords, those of you who are into bar chords now, you're using the CAGED system, so to speak. And I want to say the CAGED system, it's nothing new, and it's not some big revelation. It's just a way of looking at the guitar neck that helps make sense out of it for many people, not everybody. Some people, they really have strong feelings against it, but for a lot of people, they get value out of it. And it's like anything, the human race likes to kind of label things and categorize things, and so this is a way to kind of label things that helps make sense. It is of no use if you just learn it and don't actually use it for anything or do anything with it.
Yeah.
And for that reason, I don't actually recommend you go out and study the CAGED system. I recommend you learn some basics and see what you can use and apply it, and then add a little more and so on.
Got it.
So here's the concept. The chord forms are what we're after now. So a C chord can be a chord form all up and down the neck. So let's say we're going to take that C chord form and turn it into another chord. We're going to move it up the neck 1 fret. Now it's a C sharp, right? And if you don't know your notes on at least the 5th and 6th string, that's very valuable. I really encourage, matter of fact, I'll put a link to how to memorize the notes on the 5th and 6th string, because it'll really help you. And this is one of the places it'll help you. So when I get to C sharp, the problem is, even though the notes that I'm fingering have moved up a half step from here to here, 1 fret, the open strings haven't.
Yeah.
So I need to change that into what we call some type of bar chord. Now if I had a capo, I could put the capo there and then make the C chord there, and it would work, because the capo would basically cover the open strings. But to do it without a capo, I'm going to have to refinger the chord. So I'm going to finger the chord like this. Let me see, I can't quite see there. Yeah, okay, I got it. So I got a C chord there, because now I got the first finger free. When I raise it up, I can bar and cover the open strings. Now I have a C sharp chord. Another half step and I've got a D chord, and so on. The root for this chord, look at the C chord, is right there on my third finger. It's on that fifth string. That's why I said most valuable to memorize the notes on the fifth and sixth strings. Mm-hmm. Nice to know all the notes, but those two strings are very, very valuable. So the note here indicates the chord name. That's a C sharp. That's a C sharp note. Here it's a D. And again, I'm going to refinger it because I got to count for the open string. So this is a D chord. This is a C shape, but a D chord. Now, that's a D chord. That's a D chord. That's a D chord. That's a D chord, and so on. The idea is this is going to allow me to play chords using those 5 shapes all up and down the neck. So let me go through each of the chords and show you what I mean. This is a C chord, and knowing the 5 shapes, let's do the 5 shapes just right quick. C, I told you already, it's C, CAGED, A, G, E, and D. Those are the shapes, as well as when they're down here, the chords. Now I'm going to take the C chord, and I'm going to use all the shapes to show you I can play the C chord all up and down the neck. So I'm going to make the C chord like this. No, it doesn't matter. That's a C chord. The next one, using that root note, the C, is I can go up, and I still want to use that root note, is going to be an A chord. So I can take the A chord form and move it up to where I'm going to use that C root, and it becomes a C chord.
Oh.
So look, A, and the open A is the root note. Move it up 2 steps, it becomes B, but I got to take care of that open string. You can do a bar, or you can just play that single note. And then from B to C, remember half step between B and C and E and F? C. So I've got C here, a C here. By the way,
you can use the A shape.
On electric guitar, I almost always play it like that. And acoustic, I go back and forth depending on what I'm doing. Classical, I almost always play it like that because the nylon string's wider. Now, we need the next form. So I got the C root here. The next C form, the next root is going to be on the 6th string, right there. So next comes the G form. Look at this. This is a G chord. Root's right there. G, 1 step to A, root right there. B, half step to C. That's a C chord.
Oh.
Now that's a difficult form to play, by the way, and not a lot of people use that full form. Sometimes I'll use a partial one like this. I use that in fingerstyle guitar. But anyway, back to the showing you the chords. Let's get the chords first, and I'll talk about which are more useful than the others. Now the next one, that's a C root. We can use the E shape form. C, A, G, E comes next. E, root there. Another C. One more, right? C, A, G, D. C, A, G, D, E.
D.
D is at the end, yeah. E, D, D, D. And there we are. That's the root, an octave of this. Now I cannot use a bar version of that, and tell you the truth, I don't really use this form. But it does help to visualize the neck using this. In practical playing, I don't really use that form. I don't really use the G form or the D form very much. But I do use this C form. So now you can see you can play all the chords using these forms. Every form you can play up and down the neck.
So what if you wanted to move an A chord up and down the neck? What would that look like?
Let's do it.
Okay.
A, there's the root. Now we're going to find the next root A. We'll go to E form. We're going in a circle. It's C, A. No, we forgot G. We forgot the G form. There it is.
Ah, okay.
So look, G, A.
So you're using the G chord shape.
I got to go over
fingers.
C, A, G, E, D. Yeah, you
yeah.
caught me there. I skipped the G.
G, and now you're going to do the E form.
The E form.
The E form.
So
with an
E, F, G, A.
Okay, and then now you would do the D form.
D. So the root's going to be here.
And then now you'd finish with the C form of it.
C form. Let's see. A. Oh, right there. There we go.
Ah, okay, there it is.
So I don't use the C form very much up in here, but I do use it down in here. Here is a very valuable, here's a use of the C form. Sometimes I'll play a C chord, but I want a D chord that's not on the high string, so I'll play the D chord here. Let's see, C, D, there it is. So I like this because it's a fuller sound. Another one, the only practical way I know to play an E flat is right here. If I need an E flat chord, that's
Right.
what I go to. I can play it way up in here. Let's see, E flat, but it's such a high pitch. This is a much more fuller chord. D, E flat.
Got it.
So E, can't go down.
That is fascinating. That is fascinating.
So, knowing this, and of course you can see what I mean, you really need to like practice the chord forms, and I wouldn't just work on all the chord forms. I would find the ones that are most useful, like start with just C and find the C's all up and down the neck and get good at that, and then go on to the next chord, find E's all up and down the neck. It allows you to kind of see where all the chords are, and you can play partial chords. So like this A chord, I wouldn't really play that, but I do play this. That's a part of this. Yeah, I just left off the bass one. And that's useful form. The other thing is, there is a way of looking at these forms and figuring out a scale that goes with each of the forms. I don't honestly use that very much, so I won't go into something that I don't really use. But I know people that find that very helpful, especially with the pentatonic scales, to use a major pentatonic when you see and attach it to the chord form of the major.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an overview of the CAGED system and how it works. And of course, there's a lot of subtleties and uses for it. And you certainly will find people that says it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And you'll find people that said, no, it's a total waste of time or even harmful, I read last night, which I thought was a little extreme. But to me, I find this is sort of one way of looking at the guitar, and it's not really new. I can see the chord forms up and down the neck without actually calling it the CAGED system. But I find it kind of useful and interesting. So the question that I had was about the D form, if there's a way to finger the D form in a way that's more useful, because I imagine this is Shulamit.
Shulamit.
Shulamit. Shulamit, thank you for asking the question, because it inspired this whole discussion about the CAGED system. To be honest with you, I never used that D form, never. So I wouldn't spend the time there. That's just my opinion. Certainly there's other opinions. But I don't know, if you're really expert at bar chords, maybe that's something to explore. But if you're still not confident on basic E form and A form bar chords, that's where I'd put the time and energy. That's where it's going to be used. And the next step after that might be working on the C form. I find this more useful than the D form. And I mean getting fluent with it to where you can move it around the neck easily and say the names of the notes. That's a C, D sharp, or E flat. Get used to where you can finger it and know the name of the chord right away. D form, I don't find useful. The G form, I don't find useful either, which you seem to already realize that. And nobody I know actually uses that like that. I mean, actually plays like that. I've seen occasional classical guitar finger something close to that, but only in very passing. And
Right.
they're not really thinking it's a CAGED system. They're reading the notes on the sheet music.
Yeah, yeah. That's interesting. I mean, so theoretically, every chord on the guitar, chord shape that you're doing with your fingers, is movable if you make a bar chord of it and move it up, right?
Theoretically, some are more useful and depending on the fingering than others.
Right, because it depends on kind of like where you're starting. So I'll grab a uke. So for example, so like Here's a major 7 chord on the uke, like a C major 7. So it's a C sharp major 7, D major 7, D sharp major 7. Just bugging me.
Speaking of the major 7,
Same
by the
thing.
way, you just reminded me. Sometimes I never use the D shape, except by itself, by the way. I'll play like this. I call these baby chords, or just 3-note chords. But sometimes I'll use this C major. I'll play it like this. This is a D major, and this is a D major 7. So I've added a 7th to it, and I'll play it like that.
Yeah. So it's the same thing. I mean, those chords are movable, so no matter where you start, you would just go, each fret is a half step up from that, which is why you were saying it's good to memorize the names of the notes on those 2 strings, so that way you know if you're going from C to
If you can't
A or
easily
whatever.
find a note on the 5th and 6th string, that's definitely one of the best place to put your time and effort. And do it a little at a time. Don't think you're going to get it all in one sitting, but keep coming back at it. Name the notes on the 5th and 6th
Got
string.
it. Because the whole time I was trying to figure out, I was like, okay, I get that you got to move up, but why and how do you know how many? I mean, theoretically, I'm like, how many steps between C and A, but like for someone who's just trying to figure this out, you do want to memorize those so that you know where to find your root.
So the other,
Got
I
it.
mean, the practical use for that is if you're making bar chords up and down the neck,
Right.
the root is always on the 6th string of this form of the bar chord. And again, I'm separating that. It's an E form, but I'm making now a G bar chord.
I
And if you
understand.
know the names, you can quickly get to a sharp bar chord, a F,
Yeah.
so on. And this form you can change. So now take this frost, it's a G minor form.
Right.
Now it's a G minor 7. So on. There's
Whatever it is, yeah.
and of course there's the whole 5th. This has the notes on the 5th string. This is the
Yeah.
A shape, minor, same as A minor, and so on.
Yeah.
There's not as many minor shapes as major shapes that you can use up and down the neck.
Right.
But there's still, 2 or 3 very valuable ones, very useful ones.
Yeah. I actually like teaching some of this stuff to my students just so some of y'all may be wondering, like, where's the practicality, though? Like, why? Why
That's
learn
me.
this? Yes.
Where can I actually use this? I don't want to
Right.
just kind of think about, sit in the corner and think about how interesting
Yeah.
this is.
Yeah, well, one thing that I tell my students when I don't know the CAGED method, this is my first time being introduced to it, but the idea of having like movable chords and knowing how that whole thing works is like, let's say that you're somewhere with your friends and they pull up a PDF, or they have a book of a song, like, oh, play this with me, and you're looking and you don't know the chords and you don't have time to sit there and pull up your phone and Google how to play the chord. If you know how to do this and you see a chord that you may not know the right fingering, you can at least get somewhere close to it. Because if you're seeing like a F sharp minor 7 chord and you know what a minor 7 chord shape looks like in a different key, theoretically you could find it by doing this.
It's very valuable to learn the E form of the bar chord and the versions of it, the minor and the minor 7, but
Right.
especially the E and the E minor and the minor 7 and 7th forms, because you can make any chord with those 4 forms up and down the neck.
Yeah.
Add to that we'll call the A shape, which has the root on the 5th string, and the same thing, A minor, all those become movable forms. Boy, you have a whole repertoire of chords at your fingertips.
Yeah.
Just by learning, 8 different forms. Minor, major, minor 7th, and 7th.
7th, yeah.
And that's the 6th string root, and then you got the A shape, which is the 5th string root. That's 8, huh?
Something like that.
My kids used to tease me, this finger doesn't work, and they call that 7.5.
That's funny. That's wrong.
Okay, if you have any questions on the CAGED system or what we've talked about, please enter them. If you have any questions about playing guitar, now's a great time. We're going to start answering questions that have been pre-submitted and then answer any other questions that you guys have.
Yes. Well, let's start with those while everyone's sending their stuff in. First question is from Shulamit, who I know is watching because they said, thanks. Hey, Shulamit. All right, so Shulamit says, I find the D shape to be extremely difficult, which you kind of already touched on, right? The stretch is too much for my small hands. Is there some trick or partial bar that will work with it to make it usable?
Okay, that's the question I answered.
Right, that's the one you answered. We all use the E and A shapes, but when would it be advisable to use the C and D shapes anyway? Are there practical uses? Forget the G shape. Nobody uses it. It's so difficult.
Same with the D shape. I
Right.
don't find the practical use for me anyway. I'd be curious if there's other guitarists that have uses for it, and I'd love to hear about it, but I haven't. My friends don't use that form either.
Yeah, makes sense.
I will say the C shape, as I mentioned, I find it very useful for when I want to play a D that's a little fuller sound, and for chords like the E flat, which I don't have a good way of playing that otherwise, unless I play it way up here on the neck.
Yeah.
Here's another E flat. But this sound, I like that sound. I like that on the acoustic guitar better than this. On electric guitar, I use that all the time.
Yeah, the other one sounds more balanced. You get a little
Sounds
bit
more balanced, maybe a little fuller.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, we have Anthony. This is a pre-submitted question. Says, on the music sheet, how do I know what key the music is in? Sometimes there are no chord names.
Yes. So when you have no chords and you're looking at a piece of sheet music, one kind of go-to way is we look at the key signature in the front of the...
Mm-hmm.
The key signature is those sharps and flats in the beginning.
Yep.
And this, what you need to do is either have a chart handy or just know your key signatures. So each key signature can either be a minor or major. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
A minor or a major.
Right.
So for an example, if you see two sharps,
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be the key of D major or B minor. And it could be one or the other. At that point, you wouldn't know until you actually look at the notes and kind of see if it sounds like a minor. I guess you could look at the beginning ending notes and see if it's kind of ending or beginning on notes that would make a B minor chord. Often a tune ends in the chord that's in the key. Often, if it's B minor, it'll often start or end or both in the key, in a B minor chord. So you can look at the melody and kind of see what chord it's indicating. But it takes a little more work unless you know. What I often do is if I have a piece of sheet music, I'll play it and I just listen. I can hear if it's a major or minor by the sound of it.
Yeah, definitely. There are also tricks. I know a little trick. So let's say you have a song with a bunch of sharps. By the way, for those of you who aren't super into reading sheet music, there is an actual set order of sharps. Just to be clear about that. You're not going to see G sharp and then A sharp and then F sharp and then D. Like there's a set order of sharps. So it'll tell you X amount of sharps means this, X amount of flats means that. So here's one tip that I know. If you take a look at your key signature and you look at the last sharp in your line of sharps. So let's say you only have two of them. You have a C sharp and then an F sharp because that's the order that they'd go in. No, F sharp. No, I was right. C sharp, then an F sharp. Wait, maybe I got it backwards.
F sharp.
Felix, go. Tell me, what was it?
F sharp is the first sharp.
Yeah.
Okay, so F sharp, F sharp and then C sharp is the second one, right? Okay, so you go to your last sharp and you go a half step above that and that'll tell you what the key is. So if you see F sharp, yes, major. So if you're F sharp and C sharp, your last sharp there in that line is C sharp, so you go a half step above, that would be D. You're in the key of D major.
And then you'd have to know what minor key went with that.
What minor key went with that.
Just memorize D major. The minor key version of that is B minor.
Which admittedly, I do not know. So I never had to do theory stuff.
Yeah.
I always just use my ear.
One way you can tell is you can just count up. D, E, F, G, A, B. The sixth is the minor.
Okay.
From the,
yeah, that makes sense.
major,
The minor sixth. Okay.
And then you have to know if it's a sharp or flat, but you can tell by the key signature.
Right. Felix, what you got?
You can also go backwards. So if you're at D major, D with your root, then you can go back to B. So I always have these triplets in mind of skipping every other note. So like A, C, E. Then I apply my sharps and flats as necessary, but I know A, C, E is the A triad. So then I'm always having in my head, well, it's B, D, F. So I know that B is backwards from D. So
Interesting.
I go backwards for my sixth.
Instead of going six, you'll go the other way.
Oh, yeah. Back to third.
That's interesting. I do have a trick for the flats as well. But I don't remember it.
It's
It's similar to that one I just. I think it's the second in your list of flats, it's the second from the last flat. Do you remember it, Felix?
One of you guys out there must know the trick for flat. Come on, let us put it in the comment field. Let us get it out here.
Felix,
we'll put it in the notes too.
Yeah. Do you remember it?
Yeah, I know it. So your first flat is B flat, which is F major.
Right.
And then you go B flat, E flat. So if you have two flats being B flat and E flat,
Right.
B flat is your key.
Or
It's
you
the
go
second
back to
from,
the.
it's the second to last. Yeah, it's the second to last. So the order of flats is B flat, then E flat, A flat, D flat. So let's say you have 4 flats on your sheet of music, B, E, A, D. You're in the key of A flat.
Exactly.
So it's the
see.
second
Go
to
backwards.
last flat.
You go
Yep.
back.
Okay.
So for your flats, second to last flat will tell you the key. For your sharps, it's the last sharp 1/2 step above that.
If you're reading a live sheet music, I know people are just reading sheet music. They don't even think about it. They look at it and they know that's the key of A flat. I mean,
Right.
they just know it because they've seen it so many times.
Right.
So, what's the next question?
So next question, we'll actually take a live question since folks are here right now.
Like live ones.
Uh-huh. So Shulamit says, I have a friend who is learning to play guitar, but has only about 15 minutes a day to practice. How should she use her practice time?
Well, now I would need to say what level. Are they just brand new starting out? If they're a member of Real Guitar Success, I would spend that time just practicing an orderly lesson that's already created in order. So it's sort of set out. Here's the next thing, here's the next thing. If you got 15 minutes, spend your 15 minutes on that. If you have 15 minutes, I would spend a minute or two kind of warming up on something that you already know or done last time to kind of get the fingers going.
Right.
And I'd also, even with only 15 minutes, I'd try to end with a few minutes on something that you practice, just so you can end on something that you feel like you can do, not end and go on to the rest of your day failing miserably at what you're trying to learn.
Right.
It's just, it creates a bad attitude after a while. And I've learned to pay attention to these subtle things.
For sure.
But 15 minutes a day, you can make progress. And my guess would be it turned into more as you start getting some success.
Yeah. And I would say as well, if you have a limited amount of time to practice, it's really, really important to set clear goals for each of your practice sessions. I've found that to be extremely helpful because otherwise you'll kind of walk into it aimlessly, like, okay, I'm going to warm up on something I know, and now I guess I'll work on some stuff and then finish with something I know. You want to have like a clear idea. So let's say you're working on a particular song. You can say, okay, today I'm going to work on the verse, or today I'm straight up going to do the transition between the end of the verse and the beginning of the chorus. So you start with something that you know, you go straight into that section of your song to continue to work through that, take it slow, break it down, whatever you need to do, and then you can finish up by doing something that you enjoy.
And that's kind of where it depends on the level, because if they're brand new starting, they probably wouldn't start off with a song. They have to learn a few elements to get to using a song, and preferably a song that's graded to where they're at. So when you start learning a few chords and you start getting the hang of it, you want to learn something or use it in a way.
Yeah, and Shulamit says that the person in question knows how to play most open chords.
Oh, so that's very different.
Yeah.
If they're a member of Real Guitar Success, I would do the practice plan, because that'll keep introducing them in 10, 15 minutes to something new, and then they can decide from there what to work on more and to set that as a goal.
Yeah, exactly. And I agree that having some sort of guidance is really important. I tell that to people all the time, especially when it comes to really any instrument, but guitar is such a physical instrument. I mean, if you aren't going with some sort of guidance, like, you can develop these really crazy habits that are going to hinder you down the line when you're trying to learn more stuff. You try to figure out why you can't do bar chords, and it's because you have carpal tunnel, because you've been holding your wrist all crazy for years.
It's kind of that idea, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And especially when you're in that kind of stage where you know your open chords, it's hard to know what you should be working on unless you have some kind of path.
Yeah.
Or a teacher that has a path they can kind of feed you based on the feedback that they're seeing.
Yeah.
How well you're doing.
Exactly. Yeah. Thanks, Shulamit. That's a really good question. We have Anne with another live question. Anne says, how can I learn what notes are in each key?
What do you think? What does that mean?
how can I learn what notes are in each key? Are you meaning like what the order of flats and sharps is, or are you talking about scales? Because that could be another thing.
Then
That's
what
how I
notes are in each
interpret it.
scale in each key?
Right, because if you're like, what, for A minor, how do I know what notes are in A minor, the key of A minor? In which case I answered that question, that would be scales. You kind of have to know your scales. But Anne, I know you're here, so clarify if you.
Yeah, tell
if
us
you
a little
can.
more.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be that. I mean, I think also the first step is you got to know your chromatic scale before you can do any of this. You have to know C, C sharp, D, D sharp, and all that good stuff. Because if you don't know every note, then trying to figure out what notes are in things, you're going to end up with an H somewhere, and then you've gone somewhere too far. So make sure you get that. Oh, she says, what notes are in the C chord?
Oh, well, that's very different.
That is different.
How do you learn what notes are in each chord? So this is a process. There's not like you do this and you know it.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, chords are made of notes from a scale. So you'd want to learn start with one scale. Usually the C scale is what we start with, and learn the notes in each of the scale. I would play them on your instrument so you connect the sound, and then learn the chords that are in each of the scales. There's a chord built on each note in the scale. So from the C scale, the first chord would be a C major, C, E, G.
Yep.
And so on. The next note in the C scale is D. That's not really good. Let's call that C, and that's D. It's going to be a minor chord. So I know the order of chords in terms of major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, and then the seventh is the diminished chord. I have a lesson on this. Let me see if it's on YouTube. I'll search and put a link. So you need more lessons on learning what scales. Start with one at a time, what chords go in each scale and how the chords are constructed.
Yes.
And then learn the order of the chords in that scale. I would encourage you to actually apply it to your guitar and play it. That's where some common chord progressions come in handy. Play some chord progressions that are used over and over, using chords from one scale or key, we could say. You can use that interchangeably here. If you say the C key, it's basically the notes that form the C scale.
Right. Yeah, that's a totally good question. And one thing that I work with my students on often so they can start figuring out what notes are in chords is what I call chord recipes. So just starting with like a major triad is a 1, 3, 5. So if you know your C major scale, so I'm going to take the first note, 1, and then skip the second, 2. Here's 3, 4, 5. So that gives me C, E, and G. That's how I know what notes are in the C major scale. So if you start learning, like Thomas said, and kind of figuring out what your chord recipes are, or like what chords are comprised of, then you'll be able to kind of figure that out.
It's a valuable study, but I encourage you to apply it on the guitar.
Yeah.
Because I do think that just thinking about these things without application is kind of a dead end. If you apply it and mostly connect that sound with your ideas, it becomes something that you can use and you'll remember as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's a really good question, Anne. Okay. And Warren's comment, Warren is someone else who's watching, says intervals. So yeah, that's exactly what we were just talking about. You got to know your intervals.
It's sort of, this is where that, you ever heard that tale of the wise man who sent his disciples out to tell him what a elephant is like? And they're blind, and they all go out and they feel different parts of the elephant, and they come back, and one says, "Oh, the elephant is like a big pillar." He checked out the leg. No, one's like a rope hanging from the sky. One is like a hard pointing things coming from the sky, the tusk. Mm-hmm. Well, all those things together come out to be the elephant. They can't see the whole picture.
Yeah.
Intervals and the scales are actually all kind of the same picture coming at it from different angles.
Exactly.
So another way of thinking about a chord is just notes that are certain intervals from one to each other. Mm-hmm. And one way you can get those notes is by counting the notes out of the scale, or you could just measure the distance. I could start with a C note, get an interval of 2 whole steps, and that comes out to be a C note, and then go an interval of 1.5 steps, and that comes out to be a G note, and you'll have a major chord. You see, it's just 2 kind of ways of coming at the same idea.
Yeah.
And as you study these things, they all kind of come together. You start seeing the whole picture.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Let's go on to another pre-submitted question from Rod. Rod says, I've seen players, you included, playing the same chord over a series of bars, but each time the fingers are lifted and put back down on the strings. Why? That's a good question.
Do I lift my fingers?
Yes, you do.
Let's try it.
Of course you are.
Well, right now what I'm doing is I'm stopping the sound. As I lift my fingers, it deadens the sound, and I want that to create the rhythm.
Yep.
This is without lifting. It's just one big blah.
Yep.
I'm missing some of the groove. I'm missing some of the subtleties, the spice. Yeah.
Yep. That I do the same thing on uke.
I also, by the way, and I know you need NASA's, but if anybody's interested, I'm careful to lift my fingers up from going one chord to the other.
Mm-hmm.
That comes from actually being in the studio and recording. It's string noise. If I stay down too close, you don't hear it too much now, but there's a phew, phew. And when you're recording in the studio, it's really loud. It's really noticeable.
Yeah.
So it's not that I can never get it to go away completely, but I try to soften it.
Right. It's just your fingers gliding across the strings.
It took years to get to where, I could lift them up enough to soften it without lifting them so far it disrupted the rhythm.
Yeah. When you do that, what you were just doing, that kind of like funky sound, I call it the Nile Rodgers sound because, he does this cool funk guitar stuff. What do you call that? Because I call it left hand muting when I teach
I call
it
it
to
left
my
hand
students.
muting.
Okay.
I call the right hand muting a palm mute,
Right.
and the left hand muting lifting the strings.
Muting. And essentially muting them with your fingers.
Sometimes I do the two together,
Yeah.
just to kind of help each other out.
Yeah, cool. Okay. Sharina says, how do I create my own fingerstyle and how to improve your guitar skills? I want to play the guitar without looking for chords or without downloading tabs from others.
Okay, big subject.
Yeah.
Basically, you want to learn how to play guitar, really play guitar,
Yeah.
not just copy the music or get tabs from somebody and try to. So, really, there's no like short magic formula. It's you study the guitar step by step. You practice every day, little by little. You start learning the patterns and chords. You learn a variety of chords, and you add on to that over time. The same with fingerpicking patterns. When you learn a fingerpicking pattern over time, you start memorizing more patterns. Then you got a whole repertoire of patterns. For the most part, we don't just create a new fingerpicking pattern on the fly. We're always relying on something that we've been doing over and over.
Right.
Anything else you can say about that? Again, it's not a magic formula. We're talking about a step-by-step learning process.
I would say a couple of tips on that, because this is like a really common thing that we get here at the in-person schools. I'll have adult students normally come in and be like, I just want to be able to play.
Yeah.
And I'm like, great, let's get you to be
Make it
able to
happen.
play. Yeah. But the thing about it is that music is an accumulative sort of learning type of situation. I tell people all the time, it's one of those things where you're going to play one phrase wrong 50 times in a row. You're going to go to sleep and you'll wake up and you'll have it the next day. That's just kind of how music works. And so I often encourage people to really just enjoy the journey and remind them that, like, if you put a 2-month-old baby on the ground and tell them to run, it's not going to happen. They have to learn how to get their balance. You have to learn how to crawl. Then you can stand. Then you can walk. And you're going to stumble. And that's kind of a part of the journey.
Then you can pole vault and all those things build one on the other.
Exactly. And so I often remind students to, like, remember that you can't compare yourself to someone who's been playing for 30 years. It's just not going to happen that quickly. It's not. But you can enjoy the journey, and as long as you're taking step by step, like if you're following some sort of process, that's when you'll find the most success. Because if you're just relying on Googling chords and watching a couple videos on YouTube here and there, honestly, it's not going to get you there. Not in the way that you think that it's going to, most likely. So you do want to have some sort of approach or guideline or roadmap that you're going to follow to help get you where you want to go.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Thank
my
you.
tip. Yeah. Okay.
Well said.
Thank you. Let's see. This is, I think, Rogelio, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. I'm around the beginning of the 4th adventure on RGS, I'm assuming. I'm really enjoying the lessons. Up to this point, it's been very straightforward to follow and learn. I see that I will take repetition and I'm going slow as I need to, as I'm learning many new things. Some of the teachings are a review. However, Thomas, I am learning. You're a good teacher. I will try to make the live training. Are there any archives of past coaching calls?
Well, first of all, thank you, Rogelio. I appreciate that. And just for everybody else, he says the fourth adventure, he's going through a series of beginning step-by-step lessons. It's adventures 1 through 5, and each adventure has, somewhere around 15, 20 steps. So it sounds like he's doing it. He's following the steps. There is a archive in Real Guitar Success of all the live trainings, and it's on the left-hand side. If you look at Real Guitar U, you'll find when you go there several different archives of training and courses and practice plans. The one that you want is RGS Live, and you'll find them all ordered by date. The newest one first, going back to dozens.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you'll see the subjects on each one if you're looking for a particular subject. You can, on the right-hand side, you can also select what kinds of subjects you're looking for.
Yeah, that's great. And that, again, kind of goes back to my thing about no matter what system you're using, make sure that you have some sort of path laid out while you're trying to learn something new, because you don't know what you don't know, like you said, right? We have a great question from Bud that's live.
Hey, Bud.
Bud says, what are the most popular finger-picking patterns?
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, right?
Because, well, first of all, there's two things here, and I'll give you more than you asked for. Popular depends on style, and, we'll have 10 people with 10 different opinions on what the most popular ones are, but I can still narrow that down. Then there's the ones you should start off with, and the ones that are most commonly used. I would start off with fingerpicking patterns with a basic, what we call arpeggio. By the way, arpeggio is just a chord broken up one note at a time. This is an arpeggio. That's just a note broken up a chord broken up one note at a time. And then I would go to a up and down arpeggio. There's a fairly simple finger picking pattern. Did I say that right? Simple finger picking pattern. Peter Paul, it sounds like one of those.
Yeah.
And it's used all over the place. I mean,
Yeah.
we take it for granted. We don't really pay attention. Oh, listen to that finger picking pattern.
Oh.
See, it's sped up. You start slow.
Yeah.
One that I find the most popular ones is this called a Travis pattern. It's with alternating bass note. It sounds like this. I don't recommend, if you're really new, starting there. You need to get your fingers under your control with some simpler patterns. But it's not as hard as it looks at first shot either.
Yeah.
And the trick is, the reason I don't like to start people on there is they try too hard and tense up, and it holds them back from either getting smooth and fast and from making it fun. It's painful. It's work. It doesn't have to be. Start with the simpler patterns and get the relaxed feel. Get to where your fingers can go to the string and without having to think too hard about it. Then when you do this, that's all out of the way.
Right.
Most pop songs that you hear, and I'm talking about, in the rock pop genre that use finger picking, using some form of the Travis pattern. There's a bunch of little variations on that.
Yeah.
Things like Landslide by Fleetwood Mac and Dust in the Wind, all those are a form of a finger picking pattern.
Yeah.
A Travis finger picking pattern.
Right, right.
After Merle Travis, the famous country picker.
I think that we have an RGS Live where you taught that, because I remember struggling my way through that in front of all these lovely people at one point.
Maybe, yeah. We'll put a note and
Yeah.
maybe put a link to that in the notes.
Yeah, it was a while ago.
I'll
for
take
sure.
a check, yeah.
Yeah, cool. Let's see. I'm not sure that we have any other questions. Folks, feel free to enter any questions that you may have. In the meantime, should we do the raffle?
Let's do a raffle.
Okay.
Good questions, guys. Okay, and these are people who have completed the 20 practice sessions. Each day of the week, they have a new practice session, which introduces some technique or aspect of playing guitar to kind of keep them with something new and on the edge. I think of two aspects of learning guitar. One is this kind of step-by-step path, which is especially important in the early stages. But then I need students to not just depend on always having the information, but to stretch a little bit. And that's why I like to throw different things in different orders at them at the same time. I learned this when I was studying languages. Yeah, I could do the lesson step by step, but I couldn't actually use it in a live situation. It wasn't until I got put in a place where people weren't speaking English and had to use the language that I got some confidence of being able to just kind of go with the flow, and when I didn't know something of what to do and kind of how to just use something I could to communicate. Man, I made tremendous progress when I actually started stretching a little and stopped depending on everything being kind of spoon-fed to me. The two work together. And that's what we do in Real Guitar Success.
And we also give out raffle prizes.
And we give money. Oh, Amazon gift cards.
Our winner this month is Paul.
Paul, good job, Paul. Congratulations.
All right.
Okay, we'll be sending you that Amazon gift card today, probably.
Yeah. I don't think we have any other questions. That may be it for November.
That's it for this month. Thank you so much for being here with us and for being a part of our community. We'll do this again the first Tuesday of December.
Last one of the year.
Last one of the year.
Oof.
Noon. And if you have any questions in the meantime, send them to us. We'll add them. And even if you're not there at the live show, we record this and you can watch it later and not only see your question answered, but you might find some questions that I answered that you didn't even think of there. Wow, just what I needed to know.
Before we go, David Meir just put like one last
David.
little question. Can you demonstrate the palm mute with and without a pick?
Oh, yeah. I always use a pick. So when I use a pick, the technique is I'm palming and the pick goes down. So I'll do it with a chord. That's what it sounds like. Or like this. I like this. It's a common use for, I'll go open. Without a pick, I just have to pretend like I had a pick and strum down with my fingers. So same palm. Nail of the finger, and I do this on nylon string guitar. Now that I think of it, I just didn't think of it as a palm mute. So I'm using the outside of my index finger as a pick, and just going down. If I were to go up, I'd use the outside of my thumb, like that. So I guess I am a good one to ask, but I do this all the time on the nylon string guitar. I just on the steel string, I don't want to hurt my nail.
Yeah.
Hurt my finger.
I get it. Makes sense.
So I use a pick.
Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah, thanks, David. I'm glad you got that one in.
Yeah, good.
Cool. I think
So
that's it.
that's it for this week. Bye for now.
Bye, all.
Take care.